Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my vlog and welcome back to creative writing class. For today's episode, we'll be dealing with lesson 3 of creative writing subject, which entails about fiction, the elements of fiction, and also the importance of these elements when written and also something like read already into some literary works like short stories, prose, novels, dramas, and the others and the like. So therefore, I'll be switching you now with my presentation and discussion of our topic, which is about fiction, and also some reminders about, answering your modules in creative writing. So let's now go with the presentation. And again, for our topic for today, we're going to be like things to discuss, which are the following: the fiction, the elements of fiction, and the techniques and literary devices. So let's start now. So, as part of the subject, and then also the topic of creative writing is about fiction. So when we talk about fiction, this is basically more of imaginary, something like not true, and based on like more of experiences, but it can be true to life experiences. But this is just inspired true to life, but this is not basically more of having evidences that really this one has happened, because this is just imaginary. So again, our topic for today will be dealing with what is fiction, what are the subgenres or literary subgenres of fiction, and also what are the elements of fiction. So let's start first with the elements of fiction. When we talk about elements of fiction, this is basically more of the ingredients or something like this is needed, and also something like this should be seen into all fictional literary works. So this includes first one, which is about the character. I know you're very familiar with character. Character is basically more of the person, the animals, the plants, the inanimate objects, or it can either also be a characteristic. So for characters, we can identify and classify them as protagonists or antagonists. Protagonists, we call them in Tagalog as bida, antagonist, contrabida. So protagonist is basically having the outstanding character with good traits, while the opposite of it, which is the antagonist, which is about character who is opposed to protagonist. So usually antagonists are the villains of the stories or any literary work. So next one is about point of view. When we talk about point of view, this is basically the perspective of how the story was written. So this is the angle of narration on, how it was written, who is the narrator, and also how is the narration done. So it can either be, you can classify it as first person, omniscient third person, limited omniscient third person, or object third person. Now let's look into what you mean by first person point of view. When we talk about first person point of view, this is basically more of the narrator is the character of a certain story or of a certain essay. So this presents the point of view of only one character's consciousness, which limits the narrative to what the first person narrator knows, experiences, infers, or can find out by talking to the other characteristic. And the example of a first person point of view story is something like this: my heart leaped into my throat as I turned and saw a frightening shadow. So as we look into this sentence, the writer itself or the author itself is the character of the story. So having the use of the my, having the use of the I. So basically, they are using the person, or the first person pronoun. Okay. So the next one is the omniscient third person point of view. So what do you mean by omniscient third person point of view? Omniscient third person point of view is basically the narrator is all knowing and takes the reader inside the character's thoughts, feelings, and motives, as well as shows what the characters say and do. The point of view here at omniscient third person point of view is basically more of the author or the narrator takes all the sides of the characters. So basically, there's no biases, and at the same time, the different feelings of the different authors can be clearly seen into the story. So that's omniscient third person point of view. Next one is limited omniscient third person point of view. Kung yung omniscient third person point of view is basically more of the total package, or I mean the perspective is laid down for all the characters. Here at limited omniscient third person point of view is where the narrator takes the reader inside one or most very few characters, but neither the reader nor the character has the access to the inner lives of any of the other characters in the story. In short, the narrator only takes one side, or however, he also show the other, but it is limited. That's why, but the core of narrating the story is basically more of the main character and only few for the supporting character. And that's limited, omniscient, third person point of view. So can you see the difference of omniscient and limited? So omniscient, general perspective from the different characters. Limited, from the major character going to the minor characters, but the focus still is going back to the major character. Now, let's now move on to the objective person point of view, or objective third person point of view. So here, I mean, the narrator is going out from the story because the story was written into the third person point of view. So, which is about objective and can also be called objective person point of view. So here, the narrator does not see into the mind of any character. Rather, he or she reports the action and dialogue without telling the reader directly what the characters feel and think. So basically, more of they are just narrating the story, and the narrator going out from the story. That's why he used like he, she, they, like that, into the objective person point of view, unlike into the limited, and the other one also with about the omniscient and also the first person point of view. Now, did you get the differences? Again, when we talk about first person, meaning the narrator is the one, indulge also into to the story. The omniscient, all parties are into that one. The general perspective of it. The feelings are laid down by the narrator. While for the limited, there is still a focus. The main focus is about the main character, but given also to the supporting, but only limited. While for the objective person point of view is where the character, the narrator or the writer, try to take away himself from writing into a certain story. Okay. So next one, another element of fiction is about plot. Plot is basically, this is the series of events or actions that compromise the story. This is the flow of the event. So it can either be the different parts of a plot, wherein we do have the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution, and also what we call denouement. So let's start now with exposition. What do you mean by exposition? Exposition is basically the start of the story, or what we call the introduction or the beginning of the story. What can you see into the exposition? Here you can see the setting and also the introduction of the main characters. Next one is about the rising action. What do you mean by rising action? Rising action is basically, this is where the problem or the conflict is being introduced already. Okay. Next one is the climax. The climax is the exciting part of the story, because this is the highest point of the story or the turning point of the story, wherein if you're gonna be looking it into the story, ito na yung nagbabarilan. Nagsasapakan, or what we call also, the highest peak wherein they can already get into the conflict of the story, because this is the critical event with highest emotions and interest speaks. So the next one, after the climax, is where the resolution already, or resolution of the conflict, wherein the event when things to start to wind down. So the tension is also being actively resolved, and part by part or something like evidences are being seen already into the following action. That goes with the resolution, or what we call denouement. Resolution or denouement is basically the ending of the story. The conflicts were resolved and also the story concludes. Now, for the setting, as another element of fiction, is about the time and place, particularly, I mean, the locale, or what we call the place of where the story happened, and also when the story happened. So we are also very particular with time. But this doesn't only mean about place or time, but this also mean about the atmosphere of the place of where the story happened. Okay, is it a Baroque style of a place, or is it in a classical ambience? Or this is also calls for the condition of the climate, the condition of the weather, and all. So that is also part of the setting, and also the mood is also into the setting. Next one is conflict. Conflict is basically, this is in layman's term, this is the problem of the story. So what do you mean by conflict as a problem? This is a struggle between two entities. So it can either be from the protagonist versus the antagonist. So this is the social condition, the physical conflict, social conflict, I mean, the physical conflict, and also the internal. Anyway, we're going to be discussing that one in our next, next discussions about conflict and also the kinds of conflict. But the things that we are familiar with are the man versus man versus nature, man versus himself, man versus society. So there's still more. I think there are 8. So that's about conflict. Conflict is very important for a certain story, because what? Conflict gives spice to a certain story. So if there's no conflict, there's something, I mean, there's no story to tell. Understand? So conflict again gives spice to a certain story. So it gives excitement. At the same time, it gives interesting part of the story. Next one is about theme. Theme is basically more of the idea or the central message of a certain story. So theme is the idea or concept of the author. So it can either be a message, or it can either go with different theme like love, friendship, political, societal, and so on. So again, theme is very important because a story revolves with a certain theme or with a certain idea that the concept or the author would like to tell you. Okay? So next one that we're going to be dealing with is about the techniques and literary devices. Again, previously we talked about already the elements of a fiction, and they are very important. All of them should be present into a certain story. One of each not present in the story if something is missing. Imagine if there is no setting. Imagine if there is no plot. Imagine if there is no conflict, and the story itself will not be complete. So the next one that we're going to be dealing with is about techniques and literary devices. Techniques and literary devices is basically the things that you put into your fiction. I mean, these are the different techniques of authors when presenting a certain story which is into fiction. Okay? So the first one is about flashback. Second one is about the foreshadowing. Third one is about symbolism. And the fourth one is about figurative languages. Now, let's now move on with the first literary device, which is about flashback. Flashback is basically more of the narrator goes back in time. I know you see this one into the different movies na nagpa-flashback yung mga nangyari, which is, I mean, you see already, ay, kaya pala nangyaring ganito yon kasi may previous, story that is, related to what is happening into the present one. So you try to connect the dots of what is happening today and also what happened before that has a connection. So flashback is very important for you to strangle what is into the conflict, and also for you to solve the mystery of what is happening into the story. And another also, it gives you a clue of the connectivity of one situation and one scene to the other. Next one is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is basically more of the author places elements within the writing that gives clues about what will happen in the future of the story. Foreshadowing, as in layman's terms, is basically more of the clues that will eventually lead to something. So, for example, if it's a horror story, a fictional horror story, if you see like balloons, red balloons, or like if you see a knife, or for example, if you see a glass broken, so you foreshadow already that there is something wrong, or there will be a situation or bad situation that will happen, and that is foreshadowing. Next one is about symbolism. Symbolism is about not only basically the object, it can also be a situation. Symbolism is more of this is use of a situation or element that represent a larger message, idea, or concept. So what do you mean by that? Symbolism can be with, the object, can also be with, the characteristics of the character that symbolizes his status in life, or it can either also be, the character that he is portraying. So again, symbolism doesn't only about what you see, but also what you feel, and at the same time, what is the condition of the character within the situation. And they are also very important because not only it gives, critical, analysis about it, but it also gives an intense feeling from the different angle of a certain fiction. Next one is about figurative languages. I know we have already talked about figurative languages that are present into the poetry. Figurative languages also can be present into some fictional stories because this refers to the use of words in a way that deviates from the conventional order of meaning. This is basically more of not stating a statement in a literal way. So instead of saying it in a literal way, you use figurative languages so that you will intensify the language used by the character and also used by the writer. So I think that would be all for the discussion of the fiction, the elements of fiction, and some literary techniques and devices for fiction, when writing a fiction, when reading a story, and also when writing a story. So for your modules for lesson 3, I hope you are done already with lesson 1 and 2, because basically lesson 3 has a connection with lesson number 4. So make sure that you can already compare how to write a story and also how to write a poem, and what are their differences from the stanzas, the lines, the rhyming, and going to the story wherein they are not very particular with with sounds, as long as they are very particular with how you try to evolve the sequence of events. So I think that would be all. I would like to end our discussion with the following quote from Bible Study Tools: that love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends. So this is from Proverbs 17:9. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something with our lesson number 3 of creative writing. Now, if you have something or clarification about the topic and you want something to add into this discussion, to give clarifications and also to give additional discussion of a certain topic that is related with creative writing, just message into the comment section. I think that would be all. And if you have any more questions, you can just message me into our GC. Bye bye, everyone, and I hope you stay safe.